So I told her, I said, well, look, it's your cow. You do what you wish, but I'd fix the fence.
Yeah, that's a good one, and I agree with the whole story that you just told me in the green room.
Oh, you pushed the button. Thank you.
We'd like to welcome you guys back to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. This is, well, we're leading up onto Fright Night.
Ooh,
Ghouls and goblins and
ooh.
crawly things and such. And this is our Halloween 2022 episode. And in fact, I just got crawly things that just landed on me. So that's perfect. But somehow it's not creepy in this scenario. It's just annoying. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, you got the lights on, so that doesn't help any. I mean, I
yeah,
just turned off my face light to try to look spookier, and I don't know that did anything except accentuate the glare of the monitor in my glasses. So I'm not a theatrical person. What can I say? I like to be able to see what I'm doing. um, so yeah, being the pre-Halloween show, because our next episode would be November 1st, and that's after the fact, and what fun would that be? I know I get a little I get nostalgic this time of year, and start thinking back to when I was a kid and what have you. And I know here lately we haven't really been dwelling on the spooky side of Halloween.
no,
The past 3 or 4 years, we kept getting into what we did as kids and how we did as kids.
hmm
But I kind of like to compare what I thought as a kid to what I think now, so many years later, at least 5 or 6. And so I get all nostalgic and what have you for this time of year. And I start thinking about going out and going trick or treating as a kid. Now, when you were out trick or treating, you did your thing, you had fun with your friends and went out and did whatever. When you got home and started going through your candy, your ill-gotten booty, whatever you want to call it,
hmm
did you have a favorite? Did you have that one thing that you were looking for? God, I hope I got this. I hope I got this. You open up your bag, and if you found it, you were like, "Oh yeah!" And that was either the first thing you ate, or that was the one thing you hid and hoarded, so nobody else could grab it from you.
I like the little candy corn for some reason. I
Hmm.
really like that. Um, I can't think beyond that right now. I'd have to be my memory would have to be refreshed. I just remember big block. Like I remember some stories, but the candy itself. I mean, I remember the little mini candies, like those rolled up taffy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Sticky and rough to break. I remember all sorts of little. Oh, the little rolled up with this mini chalk like
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
pad.
Smarties.
Was it
They,
Smarties? Yeah.
they were kind of sour.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the tiny one. Remember, there was like a thin wrapped one,
Hmm.
like a little one that had a bunch of them in there, and you
Yeah.
just open it up and go, and you get
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I'm going to switch gears here. With me, it was any miniature candy bar. If it was a chocolate bar, and it didn't matter if it was Snickers, Three Musketeers, any of those, any of the little, I loved those. Was there anything that you would get in your trick or treat basket that you hated? The last thing you would eat out of the bag, or you'd set aside or try to give away, that you didn't like?
I don't remember too well.
Really?
Yeah, I really don't like. I don't remember the treats that. I mean, I'd have to refresh my memory. I just remember the little pumpkin or bag. Some
Uh-huh.
years we had a pumpkin.
Uh-huh.
Other years we had a plastic bag with like some sort of like ghoulish thing
Yeah.
designed on
Witches
it,
and stuff. Yeah.
witches or whatever. And because what it was that my grandmother she worked in sewing in a sewing factory,
Yeah.
and she designed countless. So for me, the special thing was dressing up. So
Yeah.
she would do. I was Superman. I was Batman. I was a pirate, and she'd go buy the the textiles and whatnot, and
Hmm.
she designed it. And like, oh, I was a ninja. I was a camouflage ninja. I didn't want to be. So she went and bought camouflage patterns and made a
Hmm.
ninja suit, and she figured out how to wrap it, making it all sort of like that.
Yeah.
So I was more focused on that, and the candy was kind of, it was cool as hell, but I can't remember well.
Really? Okay. Okay. And what led me up to this was, and I've been saving this for a couple weeks because I thought this would be a great for Halloween or pre-Halloween, whichever. Was I saw this video that talked about the absolute worst candies and why people hate these.
Hmm.
And I was shocked at what they considered one of the worst candies and the candies people hate. I was very surprised. And so I wanted to see if you named any of them on this list. And believe it or not, you did.
Okay.
You named one of them. And I've gone through probably 15 websites and a whole bunch of different lists just to see if all these people that were talking about these are the worst Halloween candies, were they printing the same list or were they different? And a couple of them were printing the same list,
Hmm.
but most of them weren't. They had different things in different positions. But you mentioned candy corn
Hmm.
that consistently rates in the top 3 worst Halloween candies that everybody hates.
And I love it.
And unpopular opinion time, I'm 100% with Eloy. I love it too. That's one of my favorites. And I don't understand the hate for candy corn. I don't get it.
It just goes to show, right, that
Uh-huh.
one person's, one person's pleasure emporium is another person's torture cage beneath
Yeah.
a cavern in Los Palos, California, where
Right.
nobody's ever been for 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, I don't get it. I don't understand the hate for candy corn. Now, one of them was um, for the worst Halloween candies is the little butterscotch, individually wrapped butterscotch, the hard candies.
Yeah.
And the reason given is because they're boring. Now, I can see that. I can understand that because I think they're boring too.
Hmm.
And I usually think candy canes are pretty boring as well. I don't get the appeal. It's just, okay, it's a mint candy. Fine. It's just there.
Yeah.
But I do not get the hate for candy corn. Now, it was made out of the same kind of candy as candy corn, but do you remember the little pumpkins? The
Yes.
little orange pumpkin with the green stem, and some of
Yeah.
them had faces and some of
I,
them did. I like them too.
yeah, I like them, but not as much as the candy corn, but I did like them as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember them. See, now you're bringing stuff up, and I can my memory bank. There was a thing. I don't want to stray too much, but I just want to mention this because there's this thing where they talk about when people. I'm trying to group it together. When people talk about things
Hmm.
that they were saying it different, and this is different, but what they were saying is when people talk about things they don't know,
Hmm.
um, as opposed to when people talk about things that they do know, it becomes obviously more specific when you know something because you have
Hmm.
more points of references. But
Yeah.
when you ask somebody something that they're not aware, like let's say Western or Eastern meditation norms of the 13th century,
Yeah.
something like that. The argument that people have made that do study these things, psychologically speaking, and memory and all this, intelligence wise and all that, is that regardless of the human being that you approach, if you ask them about anything, they could say no, but in their mind, they've mapped out the world and the
Hmm.
universe. And this is a cool thing, and that's why I introduced it to this thing. And that like you, anybody else, we've mapped out the universe already since birth,
Hmm.
We have an understanding of what the sky is. Now, you may be an astronomer, and you have the detailed points and sort of like the details figured out,
Hmm.
whereas maybe I'm just like a casual Star Trek fan, but my point of reference is that there's something called space, and your point of reference is that this is Neptune and this is the star whatchamacallit, and this is this and that. You
Hmm.
have more of a, but both of us have a point of reference, and even though mine's is weak and built upon, like, let's say late 1960s Star Trek episodes as an example, um we still have a way to commonly, in a broad sense. Anyways, reverse engineering that. I'm going to end it here because I know I'm babbling on. Reverse engineering that, when you ask somebody about a memory, do you remember this, and that? Um, One point that they made is that people oftentimes forget all the things they already know, and it becomes sort of like, I've said it in the past, like a warehouse in your brain, and you have those cabinets back there. It's not in the fore because you're not applying it. It's
Hmm.
still there,
Yep.
but it's in that waiting room, and sometimes you can't arrive at the hallway and cross section where that information is because it's just so out of the, but so it's forgotten knowledge that we forgot that we knew.
Hmm.
And so this is an example of that. Like, you're bringing up all these things, and I'm going back into the
Yep.
warehouse.
Flipping through the Rolodex and going, oh yeah, I remember them.
Yeah,
I do that all the time, and
yeah,
going through these lists to find the worst candies, and just to see, just to get a little gauge here, because like, Steve is over there saying candy corn. I like them too. Yeah, I mean, all right, logically thinking people do. I
mhm,
mean, that's just it. I mean, it's good stuff. But going through these lists, it did that for me too.
yeah.
It woke up something and go, oh, I remember them. I'll give you an example. On one list, the absolute worst candy was circus peanuts. Do you remember them?
Did they
It
have
was
a shell
a
around them, like
no,
some
it
sort of?
was a pinkish marshmallow
Oh,
peanut
I
shape.
remember. Now I remember. Yeah, I didn't like
Yeah.
those.
Oh, I love them. I still like those. And I don't know why they get hate, but I haven't thought of those in 40 years.
Yeah,
And I got to admit, going down this list of all these candies has got me going, I wonder, do they still make those? I need to go get some of them. I haven't had them in years.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they make them.
I don't know. I don't know if they did. Yeah, Steve, I like those too. Good
Mhm.
man.
I'm not too much of a candy person
Hmm.
anymore. I do like cake though.
Hmm.
Like
Oh,
cake,
I
I
love it
like.
all.
Huh?
I love it all. I
I
mean,
like cake and ice cream
here lately, well, I
and
do too.
pies. I
I
like
do too.
pies.
I like all that as well.
And pastries are good too. But as far as candy, like, let's say if you put in front of me a nice frickin' Snicker or Milky Way, I'm like,
Hmm.
ugh, like a Milky Way bar where the
Hmm.
inside is that spongy frickin', it's just sitting there. I'm
Hmm.
looking at that thing and it's like, and I used to eat that like,
Hmm.
and it was just pure. It's a bomb, dude. It's
Yeah,
a
it's
bomb.
100% sugar. But when you're six, yes, give it to me. You know, um, Linda's over here hollering Hershey bars. That's kind of an inside thing because when she was doing her spinning marathon, she wanted chocolate. She wanted chocolate. So she told me what she wanted, and I got her a bag when I went to the store. That has led to us both eating way too much candy because I got on a kick where I wanted Reese's peanut butter cup, you
I
know?
like those. Those I do like.
So I went through a thing here for a couple of weeks. I was eating way too many Reese's peanut butter cups. She also mentioned Hershey bars because we went to the store yesterday and she grabbed herself a bag of Hershey, the fun size Hershey bars. So,
Hershey's chocolate bars are good. I
mhm,
like it because they're thin.
mhm.
You can snap off the pieces, and it's it's an elegant way to consume sugar,
Yeah,
and chocolate. But
yeah.
those thick chocolate, I used to love those remember that butters or that, I guess, crunchy taffy butterfingers?
Yes. Yes.
Dude, dude, that,
I,
and would it stick all into your teeth and you
That was one of the best things about it, was it was all sticky and you could just kind of and they make Butterfinger ice cream that have chunks of Butterfinger bars in it. I still love that stuff. And believe it or not, on one list, Butterfinger was number 2 on the worst Halloween candies.
Hmm.
And I could not believe that. I'm like, are you kidding me?
I used to love those.
Butterfingers is one of the best things in the world, man.
I do remember those little ones. Yeah, they were
Oh yeah.
good. Did
Yeah.
you ever get
Dig it.
fruit or something?
From people we knew, yes. Like we'd go to my grandparents' next door neighbors, and she'd give us like an apple or an orange or something like
I
that.
think one time I got some fruit. I think it was an apple, and it was like, and back then, even back then, like back then,
Hmm.
the idea was switchblades. We got to be careful
Yeah.
into the apple and be careful. Who knows what the? But the point is this: an apple doesn't, unless it's a candy apple.
Hmm.
And even still, that's not something you would do. It doesn't. What's normal is just buy a bag of candy
Hmm.
and give it to the kids, and stop with this health kick. Even back then, probably they were thinking in terms of that.
Now,
Like, let's give the kids an apple. They're gonna love us for this.
did you ever get a caramel apple?
I've never eaten in my life a caramel apple.
Never.
Ever, ever in my life have I eaten a caramel apple because I've always picked whenever I've had
Hmm.
one, which is very rare, because I
Hmm.
think it's too much apple, and I'm here to have fun.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay,
I do.
you're dripping it in, but I've had the caramel.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there was an apple. There was some sort of and I don't know what the flavor was supposed to be. Some sort of a red stuff that they would dip them in.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
candy apple. I never liked those. I never liked those. Now Steve said the worst was the stale popcorn balls. I remember the popcorn balls as well. And you used to every once in a while, it wasn't very often, but you used to every once in a while get a little plastic, almost like an envelope of cotton candy. And it's like, why bother? Cotton
I don't
candy is
remember.
supposed to be big and fluffy like Marge Simpson's hair on a paper cone. That's
Oh
supposed to
wait,
be cotton
yeah,
candy.
and it was like kind of crunched and it
Yeah.
didn't have the same. Yeah,
And it was just, yeah, no thanks. I mean, you missed it by that much.
do you remember fruit roll-ups?
Yes. That was
I
a
don't know if
little bit after I was doing the trick or treat thing. But I used to eat heck out of those. Oh God, yes.
yeah, they were fun for
Hmm.
kids. They were fun because they came in that little cellophane or whatnot, and then you peeled it off, and you
Hmm.
peeled and it's a thin layer of just
Hmm.
sugar
Yeah.
with little seeds on it, and
Hmm.
it's everything was freaking mondo all the way in your freaking face. Sugar, dude. It was
Yeah.
sugar, dude. We were high on sugar, dude.
Well, you got to remember, we kind of inherited, and it was on the downhill slope when you were a kid about trick or treat age. But when I was young, we were only a few years out of World War II.
Hmm.
And while sugar wasn't necessarily rationed here, it was in short supply. So I was born 16 years after the end of World War II. So sugar was in short supply, not rationed, but it was considered a luxury. So after the end of World War II and all that, production built back up and it eventually became cheap enough where everybody could afford it. I mean, parents would stand out in the middle of the street and dump 5 pounds of sugar down their kid's throat because they could. Sugar didn't have the bad name that it has today,
No.
you know. So, I mean, we had all of this stuff. I mean, and they came up with more ways of pumping kids full of sugar than you could ever imagine. It was, you had chocolate milk for breakfast with a chocolate cereal that you poured milk on that turn to chocolate milk after you were done. I mean,
Mhm.
we had peanut butter and jelly in the same jar, goober grape,
Mhm.
you know, with Smucker's grape jelly that, I think they held it next to a grape, but it was basically sugar in a gelatin form with purple dye in it. They did a thing years back. I was a young kid. They called it Kugel, not Google. It was with a K. And it was supposed to be like a competition for peanut butter. Peanut butter was at least seen as a little bit healthy because it's protein.
Yeah.
But this was basically cake frosting that they wanted to. You got vanilla, you had chocolate, you had a couple, three other flavors that you were supposed to spread on bread and have that kind of a sandwich. And it lasted about 3 years. But they were just trying to come up with so many ways of getting kids high on sugar that it didn't really matter. Nobody gave a damn.
Yeah.
The fruit roll-ups came around, and we used to call it fruit leather because it was kind of like leather or vinyl, like you were eating
Yeah.
the upholstery or something.
Yeah.
And that was when the trying to get kids off of the sugar and at least have some fruit with this, okay?
Yeah,
You
they were trying
know?
to make it look healthy so that parents would say,
Mhm.
"Oh, look, it's raspberry or strawberry."
Mhm.
So that's got to be. You did mention World War II and sugar supplies and whatnot. Let me mention my connection to World War II and sugar supplies.
Okay.
Scottish kids
Mhm.
in schools during World War II were supplied each kid for their families sugar from Gregorio Escajedo Salmon.
Really?
Um, yeah, he was one of the wealthiest He was one of the wealthiest businessmen in Cuba.
Mhm.
My great granduncle,
Wow.
and my and so I have cousins that are the
Mhm.
descendants of him directly. And so during that time, he sent sugar supplies, and there's a British paper with all the information, which I've conserved.
Mhm.
I stumbled upon, but he owned sugar mills,
Mhm.
him and his children
Mhm.
in business partner, and they were one of the biggest successes. I mean, just bar none. I mean,
Mhm.
these him and these this level of
Mhm.
people loaned money to the Cuban government to keep afloat in certain scenarios.
Wow.
And that's all, and that's like documented stuff.
Wow.
That's how yeah, that's
Wow.
how successful Gregorio Esca. So he was the brother, the younger brother of my great grandfather.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they
Wow.
sent
Now,
yeah.
sugar rationing was a thing in the UK from like 1938 or 1939 up into the 1950s. They were rationed heavily over there because they just couldn't get it. And so he would have been your granduncle, you said? For
My great
him,
my great would it be great grand? So it's my great grandfather's brother.
brother, yeah, he would be your granduncle. Yeah. It So for him to be a supplier to at least Scotland, obviously he couldn't supply the entire United Kingdom. That's big. That's actually very cool because I
They
mean,
they named the amount. Well, no, it was to a specific
mhm,
locale. They mentioned the village and they
mhm,
mentioned the school
mhm,
and for all the teachers and the staff and the kids. So each kid got I don't know how many pounds or whatnot of
mhm,
sugar, like in like bags or however they
mhm.
and for them and their families.
Yeah,
Um, and when I found it, I was like, holy smokes, that's
yeah.
freaking awesome.
That was big to those people because I mean they did without because your ration may be a pound every 6 months. So, it was a very tiny, tiny amount they got. So for him to do that for that one specific place, that was a big deal.
He was a very success, and so who knows what the well, he was a businessman,
Mhm.
foremost, and like all the way businessman, like big time. So they had They had farms with cattle.
Mhm.
They had sugar mills.
Mhm.
They had just a bunch of just a
Mhm.
continuum of, and he did it all
Mhm.
as traveling from Spain to Cuba,
Mhm.
settling. Maybe 1915 is when he got there.
Mhm.
So we were talking about this earlier. My family and other things that we won't get into, but they came after the independence of Cuba. My
Yeah.
my family did, right on the cusp, right after. You know what I'm
Uh-huh.
saying? Like they traveled from,
Yeah.
and he slept on counters. Gregorio slept on
Mhm.
counters. Um, got on a horse and sold clothing on by horseback. He started buying one bull or one cow, getting more, building, open the
Yeah.
store, building until it was like,
An empire. Yeah.
it's yeah, insane. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, we've got some people over here going down memory lane. Linda talking about her mom used to make popcorn balls. They weren't bad when they were fresh. Steve talking about these were those prepackaged popcorn balls that were made a year in advance. Yes, I remember those. They, oh my God, stale. You could always tell the taste of stale popcorn. It was just like, oh no, something ain't right here. No, something ain't right.
Do you
Um,
remember the candy? Well, actually, that's Christmas. No, but they had like a bat one or some sort of. Remember that they were like a plastic flute, and in it was stuffed whatever M and
yes,
M's or yeah,
yeah, and it had like a bat on top or a skull or something like that, or
yeah,
a witch or what have you.
yeah, and you just blunk
Hmm.
and yeah.
There was a bunch of those in there. How about, do you remember peanut butter kisses? These
Reese's,
were the,
Reese's.
nope, they weren't Reese's. They didn't have nothing to do with peanut butter cups. It was like a taffy, like a saltwater taffy. They either had an orange or a black wrapper, wax paper wrapper. Pulled on it, untwisted it, and it was a peanut butter thing, like a taffy inside. Those
I
were
can't
number
picture.
three on these lists of hated Halloween candies, and I absolutely loved those damn things. I bought a bag of them. Oh God, just like a month ago.
Well, that's you're bringing it into. So
You know, I have some unpopular opinions. The one that all of these lists had in common, which the number one worst Halloween candy, was Necco wafers.
I like them.
You might as well eat blackboard chalk to me.
I like them.
To me, the only one that had any flavor to it were the black ones, the black licorice. And black licorice is also on all these lists. People don't like black licorice for
I
some
liked. You know what I liked a lot was root beer
reason. Mhm.
lollipops.
Yeah, you get the dum dums, the little
What?
bitty lollipops, individually wrapped.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the root beer flavored. That was one of them that I liked too.
I think that those exactly were the one. So those root beer, anything root beer, for some reason in candy form was it
Hmm.
was incredibly exotic and rare, as opposed to the regular
Hmm.
candy tastes. That taste had some sort of, I loved the frickin' root beer.
Did you? Okay, my grandmother's house at any time of year didn't matter. On one coffee table, they had a sofa and then their two recliners. And there was a coffee table in front of that sofa. There was a candy dish with a
Hmm.
lid. And
Hmm.
I don't care what time of year it was, you would lift that lid, there would be candy in there. Usually hard
Butterscotch.
candy, but usually hard candy, but sometimes not. There were, and the hard candies, her favorite hard candies were the one that looked like a little candy raspberry. It was red and it had like a filling of like a jam inside of it.
Did the little wrapper have like a strawberry with the little seeds on it? Do you remember those with the
I
green?
remember those. Yes, I
My
remember those
grandmother
as well.
loved those, and then the cellophane yellow butterscotch ones.
Yes, yes.
She had a thing
Hmm.
full of that stuff all the time.
Well, some of them were wrapped, some of them were not wrapped in Grandma's candy dish. But you said root beer, and that made me think of she would have these little root beer candies that looked like a root beer barrel. It was about maybe half-inch long, and it was shaped like a barrel, tapered up on top and down on the bottom, flat on the top and bottom, and it was shaped like a barrel.
I don't
and they were
remember.
root beer flavored. Oh my god, I loved
You,
those things.
but you know what? We're showing our privilege. We're showing our privilege because think about it. These are things
Hmm.
you don't get this in war torn, some strange.
No, you don't.
You don't get these memories from some sort of like you're chasing elk for these are things
Hmm.
of um of within reason, within a large margin of reason, of you could say prosperity,
Yeah,
even within the expected range of poverty that
yeah,
one would expect within the, it's still.
absolutely. I mean, but when you're 9 years old in the U.S. or 6 or 7 or whatever, life is all about first world problems.
Hmm.
You know, I've got an ice cream, but I didn't want vanilla. I wanted chocolate. Well, that's a first world problem, big time. Oh, I got a chocolate, but I wanted a dipped cone. I didn't want just a regular cone. What do you want? Nuts on it too? Well, yes, please, since you asked. Life is all about first world problems. I didn't want the blue bike. I wanted the red bike. You know?
When you were growing up, when you were growing up, and you ever had, I don't want to call it a tantrum, but any sort of like, you were not satisfied with, be it some sort of meal or some sort of event or outing or just whatever, or toy or whatever,
Mhm.
did any of your adults in the family say, well, remember, there's kids over in such and such a place, wherever that might be, that don't have these things, or something to that effect?
Nope, they would just take it away from me. Oh, that's not good enough for you? Okay, fine. Take it
So
away.
you never told, hey, listen, um,
Nope,
eat
I
your
never.
meal. There's people that are hungry in other parts of the world, so this is something
Nope,
you were never told that. I was
nope.
told that. It's not like I was told that every day, but I was told that, and I think it's an important little nugget. I mean, you have heard it said though, in a general sense, or
Oh,
is this
yes, I've heard
surprising?
it. Yeah, I've
Okay,
heard it.
okay, okay.
I've
No, I
heard the
just want.
reference and I knew what was going on, but my mom and dad knew that trying to guilt me into something was not the way to go. So if like, I don't think I ever complained about anything mom made for dinner. I don't think I ever complained about it. Um they were they weren't very accommodating to us, because mom was the kind of, if we're having pork chops, we're having pork chops and that's it.
Wait a
And if
second, but
and if you don't like it, tough. That's what's for dinner. You eat or you go without.
but let me
The
go
the
ahead.
the only exception to that rule was she knew that my brother and I despised liver, but my dad loved it. She
Yeah.
didn't really like it so much herself, but she would eat it. But whenever my dad wanted liver, what she would do, the one consolation she would give us is she would fry up my brother and I a bunch of chicken gizzards.
That was unheard of in my family.
Hmm.
Gizzards and hearts and such.
Hmm.
That was like unheard. Like that's not fit for. I mean,
Oh man, I would eat my weight in fried chicken gizzards. I kid you not. I'd tear them up. And that came about whenever mom made fried chicken. She would fry up the heart and the gizzard as well. It's part of the chicken. Go ahead. Dad would get the liver and mom would get the heart. My brother and I would each get half a gizzard. And she knew that we liked it, you
we
know?
did have we did have liver,
Mhm.
and at first I was reluctant. We're talking about a long time ago.
Yeah,
Well, everything we're
of
talking about
course.
is a long time ago, but we're talking about like everything was in black and white when you looked around. Not really, or in what is it, 420, 360
Yeah.
p. um,
Yeah.
it was a long time ago. I don't mean to exact, but I remember saying I'm gonna try this because it was the first, and it was weird. The meat
Hmm.
tasted not like meat, but they had onions on it. She had
Hmm.
onion, and then the plate of rice and stuff. I started eating. I say, okay, this is edible. Yeah, and after that first hurdle,
Uh-huh.
I've always liked liver to this day. I'll eat liver, no problemo
I
at
won't
all.
eat liver, but I don't mind liver in other things. I'm not much for liverwurst or Braunschweiger or things like
I
that.
love liverwurst. I've
But I can eat it, you know. But just if you were to make liver and onions for dinner, I would say thanks, but no thanks.
see.
It's just that's one of the few things that I just don't like.
I Anyways, going back to the thing you said that because I wanted to touch on it, just to be clear, saying, remember, there's people in other parts of the world. You equated that, or at least you mentioned, with what was the word you used? Either
Guilt.
shaming, guilting,
Trying
guilting.
to guilt me into something because some other kid didn't have it. And my attitude, my parents knew my attitude would be good, give them this, you
Okay,
know.
so I never received the message like that.
Mhm.
My first go-to, although although probably that was in effect, the
Mhm.
the 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 less, maybe not. My parents weren't, maybe not. But what's important is this. So I don't know what they were thinking, so I can't say. But
Yeah.
what's important is this. I received the information as a footnote of, there are actual people. Like, it made no difference whether I wanted it or not. Just the information given to me, and literally, I was, as a kid, even though I didn't think it through, although I'm
Mhm.
thinking it through now as we talk. But I remember receiving the concept that there's people that are much more screwed than one is.
Mhm.
But I never attached it with, like, oh well, I'm screwed, so I better eat it. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like, I never, the message didn't translate completely to man, I should. No, it was just, oh, okay, there's people somewhere else. Well, you know,
So
that's
yeah, I'm pretty fortunate to have this. Now, that message was driven into me. Having a grandfather who was a preacher.
yeah,
Believe me, when we said the blessing before dinner or something like that, we were very aware of how fortunate we were to have what we were about to have, because there were people all over the place that didn't have that. So
yeah,
I was very aware of that.
yeah,
And he sponsored several kids at the time. It was he sponsored two kids in Africa and two kids in India, because this was before India's economic boom that it's still riding to this day. I mean, India was basically a third world country that couldn't feed itself.
yeah,
And so we were very, very aware of that fact. And we knew how blessed we were and how fortunate we were to have what we had, whether we liked it or not.
yeah,
And that's why the attitude was not try to guilt you into eating it or coerce you into eating it. The attitude was, if this isn't good enough for you, get up away from the table and go eat your pride for dinner,
yeah,
you know. So it that whole, they didn't even attempt to manipulate or placate, or, well, you should be grateful to have this, because we knew to be grateful we had it. That was driven into us from an early age.
yeah. Growing up, I've told you before, but it's funny because there was a sense of um, that I didn't necessarily pick up on or was able to process because you're a kid,
Hmm.
where there's a certain there was a certain level of dignity,
Hmm.
and I'm saying it in a very in a very obvious way,
Hmm.
uh, um, um, uh, with the Cuban community and the way they dressed,
Hmm.
in the way they went out on the town, the way they interacted. There was this finesse. Not
Hmm.
that, I mean, I'm sure there were plenty that I wasn't exposed to that would have been,
Sure.
totally opposite. But there was a picture rolling in front of me, a film rolling in front of me that I was observing as coming up.
Hmm.
That was, there was a level, I don't want to say elegance, but a sophistic. I don't want to say sophistication either, although that can definitely apply. But a sort of dignity in the
Hmm.
way you comport yourself, the way you go outside, the way you interact with people. There was
Yeah.
something there that was quite
Yeah.
um, top hat to a degree. But the reason I'm saying this is, um, I grew up in Sweetwater, so when I rush out to play with my friends
Hmm.
that weren't of Cuban ancestry or whatever,
Hmm.
um, they were Anglo-Saxon and you know all
Yeah.
that. Um, they'd be playing in the mud puddles after rain,
Mm-hmm.
catching tadpoles,
Mm-hmm.
jumping in the canal,
Yeah.
going wild. And I'd run out to play with my friends, right? So I'd run out, and I remember this one time, and they gave up after a while, but I ran out without shoes.
Yeah.
And I was straight for the mud puddle. Everybody was there catching tadpoles, and we're all having, and I'm running out. Oh, I'm going to play. And my mom, whoa, 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 put on some shoes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they don't have shoes on. And so what happens is that that you grew up with this, but they weren't used to that. It
Uh-huh.
was maybe a little bit formal. There was more a little bit formality and stuff. And these kids were number one, they had plenty of kids, so
Mm-hmm.
the family would, and Sweetwater was safe, so they'd go out. It's
Yeah.
safe. Kids can run around. Really, there was
Yeah.
no danger, and it's not like, and you had your brothers and siblings and whatnot. I was the only child, so
Yeah.
maybe they're also thinking that. But, um, yeah. So I would. So I'm
Now-
thinking from the point of view they're watching their kid,
Mhm.
right? They're Cuban. Obviously, they have their child in the United States, and he's surrounded by a culture that's not necessarily, well, it's not theirs. And so they must foresee, you know what I'm saying? They
Now,
must foresee what the future holds in terms of it's not going to be a continuum of our lifestyle.
but I have to ask you about that because I don't know that that's a completely Cuban thing. And I'll link it to my family in just a minute. How much of that do you think was a Cuban thing? And how much of it do you think it was that you had parents who had done without? Because, and the reason I say this is because from the time I was like 6 years old until the time I was 16, every summer I spent the whole summer with my grandparents up here in Oregon. We lived down in California. So they were both, young during the Depression, and they were the same way. And my mother was the same way. You don't go outside without shoes on. Even if you're going to go to the neighbor's house to swim in their swimming pool, you
Mhm.
wear your shoes over there, take your shoes and socks off, then you can get in the pool.
Yeah.
But you didn't go out of the house without shoes. And it was because they went without shoes. And that was looked down on as low class. You're so broke you can't afford shoes. And I can remember my mother just absolutely going nuts if I went outside with a pair of pants that had a hole in them.
Well, she could have
Because
been. She could have been. My mom could have. Well, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
because that was looked down on too. You're a
Yeah.
ragamuffin. Now, do you? She
Yeah.
would buy iron-on patches and then iron them on to cover up the holes in my blue jeans, and then sew them down to keep them there because I'd rip them right off. They'd break loose on one edge or something.
Yeah.
But you didn't have holes in your jeans. It was okay if they were patched, but you didn't walk around with holes in your pants. So I wonder how much of that was because maybe your parents had to go without in Cuba.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Um, it's complicated, but I guess, um, remember, my father left in 62 and
Right.
Castro came in 59.
Right.
They owned a store. They
Mhm.
were part of the the families of the place that had roles in the government. They had roles in the local, what do you call it, the lodges and whatnot.
Mhm.
um, so they weren't going without initially,
Mhm.
although they did go through the Great Depression, so that would factor. But no, I think that, so you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
these were established families. I
Okay. So
you
it so
know
it may have been a cultural thing then, and I just happened to be because.
well,
But
no, well,
okay.
no. But what I was going to say is that they're old. There were also people that had lost their whole country,
Yeah.
so they arrive at a place and they're all renting in the
Mhm.
Little Havana area. They're getting jobs. They bring their titles.
Mhm.
Maybe they're a lawyer. Maybe one is a doctor. They have to go and re
Mhm.
up their credential. Who knows what the story is? Some
Mhm.
people go to work in factories. Just everybody hustling to. and then they start spreading out, you
Hmm.
know,
Sure.
into the suburbs within a few short years. It was very quick what
Hmm.
happened with the Cubans and stuff. Although, but they were all expecting to return. They lost everything that they had, and there's a point of I guess you'd say hurt, and then there's, well, I have we have pride, and this is not acceptable, and so, and a dignity, our values are this and they weren't that, and so
Hmm.
there's all these things in play, um and plus these are people from back in the day, right? Like these are
Right.
people from like back in the day, so maybe all the things you said um play a part in it,
Hmm.
and obviously it's not just the Cuban. I'm talking about it from my experience.
Yeah.
Obviously there's other people in other cultural,
Well,
varieties
and
that
that's
would
my
have.
question. I was wondering if if your parents or your grandparents had similar situation, or if there was any similarity in there. Because like my grandmother and my mother, well, that whole side of the family were basically subsistence farmers in right along the Texas Louisiana border,
Mhm.
and you know my grandmother's favorite word was ragamuffin to describe a kid who was barefoot and had holy clothes and a dirty face and unkempt hair. And so she more or less went out of her way, and she instilled in us that some personal
Yeah.
pride in your appearance,
It's like the Tom Sawyer thing.
basically,
There's the Tom
no
there's the
shoes, no nothing.
there's the Tom Sawyer figure, which is a
Hmm.
very American figure. There's a creek or a river.
Hmm.
There's woods. There's traveling through town, the
Hmm.
outskirts of town. There's visiting people from other parts of town. There's
Yeah.
the exploration aspect of it. So you had these kids in Sweetwater that were the sons of Vietnam vets,
Hmm.
um, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Coming up at my age with my, as
Yeah.
peers,
Hmm.
um, and so, but you had them as far as I can tell, I would assume a generationally North American people, or
Yeah.
that's not even right because Cuba is North America, just like
Yeah.
Mexico is North America and stuff. But that's what are you splitting, hairs here and there, but it's true. Um,
Hmm.
but you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
They've been United States people, um, generationally and stuff. So there's other things that are taken. So they would go out, they'd jump off the bridge.
Hmm.
Um,
I was
whereas
that
my
kid.
mom, whereas my mom would say, you know, well, no, they're jumping off the bridge, but you're not. But you're not. You can't do. Don't do that.
Hmm.
Don't jump in the puddles. Maybe she's worried about the ringworms. Who knows what the story?
Yeah.
Who knows what the story? But they were quite. And my father was a little bit lenient in that aspect when I was little. When I started getting older, it was a lost cause
Yeah.
because you know, I mean, everything influences and stuff. But the point is that there were differences,
Hmm.
um, obviously, in the way
Yeah.
they would comport themselves.
Yeah.
Um, but they were integral into the community to the point where my mom started a women's league with all women coming in to make changes for my father did
Mhm.
philanthropy for people that had issues. They were involved in the community, so there was a communal aspect to this, but there was those differences where you'd
Yeah.
see your friends jumping in puddles. I wanted to
Yeah.
do the same thing,
Yeah.
but in my
Yeah.
case, it's like, no, don't do it. But I go off and do it anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's just what I observed.
I would get in trouble after the fact because, yeah, no, you did not leave the house without your shoes and socks on. And that was all there is to it. And then I'd come home with wet shoes and socks, and then I'd catch hell because that didn't keep me from jumping in the puddles. It just means that I squished when I walked home. Squeak, squoosh, squeak, squoosh, squeak. Water
There
shooting out the sides of the vent holes of the tennis shoes and stuff.
there is a draw to the
Mm.
what you call the Tom Sawyer
Mhm.
character,
Well,
um, because it's exploration,
well,
it's adventure, and kids
that's
need that.
that's kind of how I spent my summers. A lot
Yeah.
of fishing, a lot of camping, going down to the creek and splashing around on the waters,
Yeah.
just skipping rocks across the pond or the lake.
But you didn't do that in a suit. You didn't do that in a
No,
three
I wasn't in a suit, but if we now let me
in
throw
a suit
this.
with a top hat, no, and one of those
No,
big bow ties and a cane.
but I will say I was probably fourth or fifth grade before I went outside in a t-shirt and not a button-up shirt that you tucked into your pants.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
and I still wore the button-up shirt tucked into the pants up into high school. You know, I didn't wear t-shirts. You didn't wear t-shirts to school.
It was a
It
different
just
world.
it just wasn't. I mean, a lot of people did, but my mother, the prude, was one of those. You're not going to school looking like that. You're going to dress nice, you know, and that came from her upbringing with her mother. And I remember if we were going to go to town to go do our shopping at Sears or Montgomery Wards or wherever, it was go take a bath, wash your hair, comb it nice, put on your nice clothes, your downtown clothes, shine your shoes, and go. You know, you always dressed and looked nice when you went to town, almost like you were dressing for church. Not quite,
Yeah.
but almost.
No, as a general sense,
Hmm.
many people. Well, see, I can't even say that, but there was a sense, biased as it might be right now, that people were better dressed, better behaved, better every. I biased as it may be, I feel like it's true
Hmm.
that things were better back then.
Right.
I can't say that I'm not biased on my assumptions because maybe it's just from my point of view at
Well,
this stage in life.
every generation thinks that their generation was the best, and everything after it was just gone to hell.
Yeah.
Every generation. My father thought that about the 50s. I think that about the 60s and 70s. You think that about the 80s, that
Mhm.
your generation's the best, and everything after that just kind of all went to hell. And
Actually, I don't. I
you know,
don't think. Well, okay. Well, I get what you're saying. I,
but
I see. I guess it's the same thing. The '80s was. This is my personal bias.
mhm.
The '80s just fine. There was some kooky stuff, but
Well,
just
yeah.
fine. The '70s, it was a little bit better as far as formality and this and that.
Mhm.
The '60s, even though there were, and going back, it was more formal and more
Yes.
structured. And the further out we go, which is kind of what you're saying, the further out we go, the less structured and more scattered
But
things seem to be.
you're looking back. I'm talking about looking
No,
forward.
no, no.
The 90s
Right.
it started kind of declining.
Well, we're saying the same thing. I just
Okay.
I repeated it out loud. Yeah, the
Yeah.
further we go forward, things
Yeah.
look to become more and more scattered. From
Right.
my vantage point,
Right.
is
And
it true? I don't know.
my father thought the same thing about the 60s and 70s. It's like, where the hell did we go wrong? And then me coming up in the 60s and 70s looked at the 80s and went, where the hell did we go wrong? And then you coming up in the 80s looked at the 90s and go, where the hell did we go wrong? We all do that, is what I'm getting at. We might think that the generation before was cool too. You know,
Mhm.
I look back at the 50s and I go, man, what a time. Rock and roll was being born. Everybody was out cruising on Saturday night in cool cars. Man, give me that culture.
Look,
You
let
know,
me jump on that. And I agree. But that's why I want to jump on this because
Mhm.
it made me think this, Mark. And this is again, this is my personal interpretation, bias, and whatnot. But totally right.
Mhm.
You can make an argument against it in a snap. There's nothing like, and I would say that back in the '80s, you have your comic shop. You can get your fixings on DC. Doesn't matter. Marvel, from Spider-Man to the X-Men. You have that entertainment with your friends. You're like, oh man, did you get the next issue? That freaking awesome. You have your D&D, and we have sit together and dragons and miss. You'd have your freaking arcade places, various ones. Hey, let's go. We'd have to ride bike there.
Mhm.
Um, with whatever quarters we had, and when the quarters were done, we're crap out of luck. We had malls where we could go window shopping and looking at all the hot babes. It just a series of things that were fun, but we didn't have the internet. We didn't have
No.
video on demand. We didn't have all that, but we had
No, we didn't have
VHS
that.
tapes and
Hmm.
stuff. So the point is, the feelings that I remember of that when I look at it, it was freaking awesome.
Well,
But
and you would because you were raised in that. Now you had the arcades. We had the bowling alley.
we had
We
bowling alleys too.
we had the bowling alley that had the game room with pinball machines and video games and all that other stuff. That was before they opened up specific stores, specific arcades with all that stuff in. We just went to the bowling alley with
Yeah,
our pocket full of quarters. And when we ran out, we'd go up to the guy that rented shoes and we'd buy a roll of quarters from him, you know, and I'll pitch in our money and buy a roll of quarters from him. Okay, I had $3 worth. All right, give me $3 worth of quarters, and off we go.
yeah,
So we had the similar amusements. I mean, we didn't have the comic book shop, but we had the comic book stand at the local drugstore or grocery store, and it was just as big and had all the same comics that the comic shop had. It's just it wasn't a specific store for it. But when people saw 30 kids hanging around the magazine racks in the drugstore at Payless drugstore reading the comic books, they thought that's a business we can get into. And so
mhm,
they opened that store in the late 70s and early 80s.
mhm.
So,
It was a
and it's the
big.
same with the arcades,
It was
you know.
such a big deal, dude.
Yeah. And video games and pinball machines were everywhere. They were at the skating rinks, they were at the pizza parlors, they were all over the place. We had a pizza parlor about 6 blocks down from the house that had 4 pool tables and an arcade room. So you could go down, shoot pool, get a pitcher of soda amongst your friends because we weren't old enough to drink beer. But you get a pitcher of soda with 6 glasses and everybody pitch in and just drink soda, shoot pool, and play games all day long. And so we had basically the same kinds of entertainments,
Yeah.
but it was a different technological advance that gave you guys things like, well, Dungeons and Dragons. We didn't really have any role playing games. We
Yeah.
made up our own, Um, we we didn't have like the laser tag thing.
Mhm.
We had to make do and throw rocks at each other, which we did. We'd have, uh, rock fights. I
There was a
mean, all that kind of stuff. I
there
mean,
was a series of in the 80s. There was a series of there was an explosion. I think it went from the 70s on, or even earlier, due to Bruce Lee and a lot of
mhm,
the you know just martial arts sort of
mhm,
stuff. But there was an explosion of ninja
mhm,
stuff in the 80s, and we were all consumed by it. So they had American Ninja,
mhm,
right? And so it was American guy, but he's learned all the techniques of the ninja.
mhm,
So it's always some sort of and we'd see these movies. But one time, friend of mine, I think it was my friend John, he comes running over. He says, "Dude, tonight we're gonna play Ninja Hunt." I went, Ninja Hunt? What's that? Oh, we run around town like ninjas and we hunt each other down. And like I don't know the rules of the game. I don't know anything. I said, "Cool." And I get ready. I run into my dad's shed. I slide the doors open, and I saw a box of light bulbs,
mhm.
brand new box of light bulbs. And I grabbed the light bulb and I started pulling light bulbs because I figured they were like explosives.
Like grenades, yeah.
Yeah, like they'd shatter. So I put those in my pockets. I started getting stuff. I equipped myself for a ninja hunt. None of the other kids had thought of like light bulbs and this and that.
Mhm,
But I went like I was ready for some sort of Rambo 2 war
mhm.
or something. And we went out across Sweetwater, climbing up freaking houses and this and that. And I would throw the first time I threw one of those light bulbs, I didn't realize all the freaking shattered glass because I was a kid. And it
Yeah.
went bam, and there's like shattered glass everywhere. I'm like, holy smokes! My friends were like, what? Fun stuff like that.
Yes.
We're inventing crap you
We
know.
did stuff like that as well. We didn't relate it to ninjas, but I can tell you one thing. You remember the old film cameras that had the flash cubes?
I do.
Do you remember flash bulbs?
I do.
You had a big reflector on top of the camera, and you'd put the individual bulb in it, and it would click into place. Then you
Mm,
take the picture, and it would
yeah.
flash in that reflector. Then you hit a little button, and it would spit out the hot bulb.
So I know about those, but when I was coming
Okay.
up, the ones that I were exposed to were the little squares that you
Yes.
click into the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it had 4 of them in there.
Hmm.
I remember getting a hold of a bunch of my dad's flash bulbs because I thought this is a light bulb. It's going to shatter like that. Well, it didn't shatter like that and make a loud pop noise, but it would pop quietly, but it flashed. I don't know what was inside of it, but if you hit it on the ground hard enough to shatter, it would flash.
Wasting all of our parents' stuff.
Yes, I mean, big time. I mean, the maddest I ever saw my mother get was one day me and my friend Vincent had an egg fight. And I went through half a flat of eggs before she caught me. She's like, "You put those eggs back in the refrigerator. You were throwing my eggs around here."
Dude, you know
Oh, yeah.
how you know how terrible that is from the adult point of view. You're watching your kid ruining food because they're
Yeah.
wanting to play. It's just, for a parent, that's like
Yeah.
a nightmare, you know.
Mhm. That's a
Oh,
week's worth of groceries you're throwing away.
I don't know if you saw. I don't know if you guys out there saw. I don't know if you saw. You probably did, because it's too obvious and what the hell not to notice. But last week, two occurrences. One, somebody went up to a Monet, two young British ladies in the museum, opened up a can of tomato soup, and launched tomato onto the Monet, the one with the flower, the one with the sunflowers, the
Mhm.
famous sunflower one, and went gush and gushed it all over in the museum, the painting. Then they took some sort of glue and glued their hands to the wall right behind it. And then the press came running and stuff, and the museum people, and the painting is dripping. What, did you see it?
No, I didn't see that.
Holy smokes, Mark! You know what they were protesting?
Mm.
The fuel industry.
Well, you know what you do with those people. This is an unpopular opinion. You start just beating the holy hell out of them. Everybody who came to that museum and paid money to go in and see that painting should have gotten one free punch. Instant negative consequence.
Dude, they
Instant negative consequence.
they launched a they emptied out a
Mhm.
whole can of tomato soup. I think it was Campbell's or something. So
Oh,
Andy
yeah.
Warhol would probably be proud. But the point is, that's a cultural benchmark for all humanity.
Yeah, that's what happens when you don't discipline your children. Now we're getting on to unpopular opinions again, and I know that. Um, and Linda's, this is the other one I bet you're going to bring up. I don't know. The same bunch that glued themselves to the floor in a VW showroom in Germany. Yeah, they glued themselves to the floor in a VW showroom to protest climate change. Then, not only did they do that, they had the nerve to get pissed when the folks at Volkswagen said, okay, they shut off the lights and went home for the night. Came back the next morning and went, oh, y'all still here? Then they got mad because, well, these people aren't going to bring us food. They're not giving us water. They're not even giving us a bucket to relieve ourselves in. And Volkswagen's like, no, why would we do that? You're
You
not
have,
invited here. You're trespassing. You glued yourself to the floor. Deal with it.
so you have to have some um nuts
Mhm.
to arrive at the conclusion of
Mhm.
destroying a painting
Yeah.
is going to muster. I mean, it's just catastrophic thing.
Well,
So on so many levels. But what they wanted to do was bring attention, because they did do a follow-up interview on a show called Valuetainment.
mhm.
Here, it's from here in South Florida.
Mhm.
It's a very popular channel because they interview all sorts of people. And when they were interviewed, they were quite, they weren't, they could string words together, and they weren't, babbling. They weren't completely dumb, right? Like these were intelligent
Mhm.
people. They could string words together. They had a reason behind their madness and such, and this and that. I'm not saying they have anywhere
Well,
near the ethical high ground in terms
sure.
of the actions that they did. But long story short, they said, "Listen, um, we're not going to have a future if we don't stop this thing." Their level of fear, if something doesn't happen right now, is ballooned, is exaggerated. And what's also exaggerated is their, I'm assuming a lot here, but their individual importance beyond your fellow man, right? Like they're taking it upon themselves
Hmm.
to force other people, or to attempt to, and I don't
Well,
know.
but I will differ with you on one thing. You said these were not stupid people. They could string a sentence together.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give them credit to be able to string a sentence together, but I will not agree with you that they're not stupid people. There's a difference. If they did this in front of an oil refinery or even at a gas station, I could see the connection. But to go into a museum and potentially destroy something that has absolutely nothing to do with the industry that they're protesting is stupid. That would be the same as me burning down their house to protest conditions in Cambodia.
Listen,
It has absolutely nothing to do with one another. And when they do things like this is the point that, and this is what tells me that these people are not smart. What they don't realize is when they do stuff like this, they condemn their cause before they get their point across. Because the minute you do something like that, ears close and eyes roll. And nobody wants to hear your reasons. You know what I mean?
the people. So I'll push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Hmm.
I don't fully disagree with it, but I partially disagree with it in this respect. I don't agree with them,
Hmm.
obviously,
Right.
but your
I get it.
your analysis. I think that there's another part to it, or my point of view of it,
Okay.
which doesn't make mine right and yours wrong, or vice
Got it.
versa. It's just my point. I think that if their goal was by any means necessary to bring attention to it, and they used the museum as that ladder to do so, as that podium to do so, even though it's unrelated,
Hmm.
it's shocking people in an unrelated field, or just so it's still on the level of bringing press to it. It's a success.
On that level, yes. But as far as
Right.
bringing support to their cause, no. In fact, it brings nothing but condemnation.
Okay,
It
so
brings nothing but hatred and scorn to their cause.
to that part, how can I say, the people that back those ladies
Hmm.
would probably, this is a big assumption,
Okay.
would probably already be backing the, well, that's an obvious one, but would probably be okay with the destruction of cultural things or any other thing to get what they think is important out there,
Right.
disregarding, you know,
Well,
everything that other people think is important. So what I'm trying to say
okay.
is this. No,
Well,
no, no. Let me give my
yeah.
point. My point is they have a captive audience that already agrees to it,
Hmm.
and the people that don't agree to it, um, would double down, like you're saying, because that's even worse. Because now you're doing
Right.
something, um, they're
And
not doing it.
people who were on the fence about it, how many of them just got turned away?
Well,
You know,
if
because
you're, if,
I kind of look at it like this: when you're contemplating something like that, you got to look at who's to benefit. What's going to be the benefit of this? It's going to bring attention to it. Okay, yes. What kind of attention?
Well,
Is
it's
it
kind of
going to bring out the pitchforks and the torches, or is it going to bring out people who are going to applaud and join our cause and take up the fight with us? Because if you're trying to get people to take up the fight and join your cause, that's not how you do it. Most logically and reasonably rationally thinking people draw the line at destruction and things like that. Most people, not all, obviously, but I would say overwhelmingly the majority of people who are on the fence about should we, I don't know, what side do I fall on? They look at something like that and say that has absolutely nothing to do with the petroleum industry. No, I can't support that. Maybe I'll support it some other way, but so when you're bringing the wrong kind of attention to it, you condemn your cause before you make your point.
well,
Is
you're gonna yeah. So anything that you do, this is a weird extreme example of what these ladies did, and the unrelatedness. I'm sure if asked,
Mhm.
how does this pertain in their minds? What exactly? And I did watch the interview, which was like a half-hour interview, but I forget now that detail. I'm sure they could come up with some explanation that could attach by way of 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but it's not apparent to the casual viewer,
Right,
because to the casual viewer these are unrelated
right.
circumstances.
And
But that
most people are casual viewers.
but that the but that obviousness, if their intent was to bring attention to it and to make some sort of change and stuff, I think it was silly from the beginning to end. They have in their minds some sort of, they think that this is effective, um, and they ruined another painting as well, but it
Mhm,
had glass, so they weren't able to. And in this case, I think that there was a film on it,
mhm.
so they were able to clean it. Although the frame could have had, somewhat,
Yeah,
dirtiness or damage or
yeah.
whatnot. So they
Well,
have certain protections on them
but
in
the
case of
intent was
situations.
there. But the intent was there.
The intention to destroy culturally important
Mhm.
items. Well, I mean, it was in order to bring it. So it reminds me of this. Not that she's done that, but this young lady, the Greta
No,
girl,
yeah,
that said, "How dare you?" and this and that, and it had this whole episodic thing in front of, like a
yeah.
European world, some sort of.
Again, a demonstration of what happens when you don't discipline your kids. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, so you know, yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that it's kind of like biting off more than a kid can chew on,
Yeah,
from the vantage point of a kid. And secondly, it also speaks to the fear that's pumped into, young minds with such, so many different catastrophic things.
yeah.
And it also speaks to the adults in these people's lives that don't, um, I mean, are they making a
Well,
buck from it, or don't
yes,
they see that
yes.
you have to protect or shield your the younger ones? Because yes, everything is a catastrophe in the happening. In life, everything is a potential catastrophe, and it's everything is the next precipice down the slope.
If you
Potential.
want it to be, yeah, potentially, yeah.
So everything is life is dangerous, right? So,
Mhm.
but if you, so if as a kid, they would have sat me down and continuously, even though I observed it and heard it, because that's what adults would talk about,
Mhm.
but things such as, what the communists have done, even though I did hear it,
Mhm.
regardless, but I wasn't sat down specifically and trained and such things, but I absorbed it because of the happenings,
Your
but
surroundings, yeah.
if I were, well, pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped the idea, which I was secondhand.
Mhm.
Um, you'd sleep with terror.
Yeah.
You'd and
Well,
you know
with us, it was the threat of the end of the world because of mutually assured destruction with nuclear weapons. You know,
yeah
we were taught that. We did the duck and cover thing, and here's how to survive a nuclear attack. And oh, the Soviets are going to bomb us, and oh, we're going to blow them up, and oh, it's going to be the end of the world, and this, that, and the other. And people lived in mortal fear. We were just past the decade of people digging holes in their backyard and making nuclear fallout shelters. We were just past that decade.
Yeah.
And people, that was seen as kind of paranoid in some parts of the country, but not in other parts of the country. It's still not seen as paranoid in some parts of the country. So, yes, I know that fear, and I know how that can be shoved down your throat so far that it can warp your way of thinking. But what it also does is it steals you to where you yourself have to make sure that that doesn't happen. You know, I'm just one person. I can only do what I can do. And I have no control over you, your neighbors, my neighbors, anybody. I don't even have control of what my wife says or thinks, nor do I want that control. All I can do is make sure that I don't add to the problem or create a problem like that. That's all I can do.
I love how you I love how you added the one the wife thing just to
Yeah,
neatly
nor
bow
do I
tie
want
everything.
to. No, I don't want a mind numbed robot who will just cook me dinner, fold my clothes, and make sure that my house is clean. That's not what I'm after. You know?
If you were to stand up in front of some sort of like let's say they were having some medieval times dinner and you
Mhm.
stood up with that proclamation, all the barbarians in the room, the knights and so they
Well,
get up
yeah.
and say take him outside and whoop
Well,
his ass.
if I wanted that, I'd have gone with one of the barbarian girls.
If you were to
I want a wife, not somebody I have to babysit. All right.
no, I'm just saying that. So if you would have stood up, that would be back
Mhm.
in the day. That would be ultimate. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be
Heresy. Yes,
yeah. That
it
would be
would
like
have been.
you
Damn, boy.
like what? The ale dripping down their freaking.
Linda says, and that never happens anyway, except cooking. I like to eat too. Yeah. Yeah, true.
No, but
uh,
your
and
point. Obviously, we took. Go ahead.
Jim Dockrell makes a good point here. Lots of these young people who want to change the world and clean it up won't even clean up their own bedroom. Exactly my point, Jim. You know, they don't have the discipline to take care of themselves. You know, clean up your room. Where's your mother? You know? Yeah.
But you know what? But in my defense, I have no defense. But in my defense, um, I'm not
Well,
calling on people to do jack squat.
right.
Like
Well,
I'm
and also in your defense, you know where everything is.
roughly,
That's your filing system.
roughly there. You know,
I don't know. We're getting way too political on this, but it
if
is the case. I think people need to just shut up and mind their own damn business. You know, well, we have the right to speak out. You have the right to shut up and go home too. How about exercising that just once? Try that right. Your life will go smoother. You know?
in a way, it's not the same thing, but there is parallel. It's like when a certain group went somewhere into that huge Buddha statue
Mhm.
and blew it the hell up because
Yeah.
it didn't it didn't
Hmm.
it didn't slide into their preconceived concept of how things should go. So they took this big Buddha
And blew it up.
and blew it the heck to smithereens. And that's something thousands of years old of
Yep.
cultural frickin' significance. And then they basically said, "We're blowing this thing to
You know
bits."
why? You know why? It
I have no
wasn't a
idea.
tourist attraction. I
Really?
guarantee you, if they'd have been making money off it, it never would have happened.
Oh no, because they were an invading force. I forget the details, so forgive me. But the invading force had a certain different religion.
Yes, I understand that, but if they could have made money off of it, they'd have never blown it up.
You
Because
well,
even the most radical in Egypt will not touch the Sphinx or a pyramid or the
yeah,
Valley of the Kings or any of those, even
yeah,
though it doesn't dovetail in with their religion,
no,
because they know it brings in the money.
man. There's this huge um
Always follow the money.
Yeah. Well, if it's making money for you and it doesn't necessarily fit with the whole thing
Mhm.
that you're, but you're still this.
That's it. I don't have to like it, but the tourists do.
But there's I think that's the progress of man. We
Hmm.
we want to preserve things that are
Hmm.
mysterious and stuff. We don't have to you don't have to follow the sun god.
No,
You know what I'm
you
saying?
don't.
But you have this history, and okay, let's look. And that's cool. There's this thing there's this temple
Hmm.
structure in Lebanon.
Hmm.
Um, I forget the name, but it's freaking massive. And there's this British guy that has a pretty cool channel. Um, I forget the details of it, but he goes to sites
Hmm.
and he just looks at monolithic structures. And um, he went to the site, dude, and like the freaking the rocks of the building or temple or whatnot are bigger than Egypt,
Hmm.
freaking monstrous.
Hmm.
And he's going through and like the whole structure. And originally, it's the building structure was started with the Phoenicians
Hmm.
that built that and stuff,
Yeah.
or began to. But then the other groups got involved, and it just until the Romans, and so it continued to work as a thing. Well, um, the whole thing is how the heck did they move this stuff from the quarry? That same problem with
Hmm.
Egypt, and I decided to comment on it. I said, man, because it's a curiosity thing, and it's like I don't know the answer, but I said, well, what if I've seen other videos where they make some sort of cement aggregate, which we have talked about on this channel,
Hmm.
and they would then just quarry rubble from the
Hmm.
thing, mix it in with the cement, and after X amount of years, it just looks like a block of the same crap that's all
Hmm.
consolidated into one block. Because to me, that would solve the problem of hauling these huge things across vast terrains just to get it to your one darn thing.
Hmm.
And how the heck it's such
Hmm.
unsurmountable in my mind. But then again, and so I thought that was a great question.
Hmm.
And so I posted it. Obviously, it was late at night. So, and a guy responded, and it was a great answer. He said, well, I don't know. I mean, it could solve some of the problems, but how do you, what did he say? He says, how do you account for perfectly formed monoliths already on site over there? Why would they do that to drag that thing all the way across town?
Excellent point. But see, that's a reasonable discussion you're having.
Yeah.
That wasn't, you're an idiot. You don't know nothing. Why the hell are you commenting?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. So
yeah.
I took it as that. But the
I
point
can
is,
have a civil
it's,
discussion with somebody.
well, yeah. But there's these huge mysterious things that are so freaking
Yeah.
cool and whatnot. Do we destroy it because it happens to be a temple that was? I
Yeah.
mean, it's like maybe
Well,
that's not a good idea.
and I think you and I and a few other, I don't remember if Greg was there, but we were having a discussion one night in a hangout and talking about the swastika
Yeah.
being part of Art Deco and going back centuries just as a
Uh,
form of decoration and of religious symbology in
millennia.
various sections. Yes. I mean, going back just, yeah, thousands of years.
Mhm.
Do we then therefore go in and tear down every single building that has that form on it because somebody adopted that symbol and corrupted it and twisted it for their own uses? Do we then go rip it down and just eliminate it from the face of the earth? I don't think anybody is arguing that we do so,
It
because
depends on the context.
it does depend on the context. Agreed there. But see, that's the litmus test. What's the context? This was built thousands of years before that war ever started, that ideology ever started. They stole that symbol. Therefore, this symbol is innocent. Leave it alone.
Listen, Che Guevara T-shirts and
Hmm.
flags and apparel are rampant through the United States, and you
Hmm.
can purchase Nazi gear. I think,
Hmm.
if not locally from certain district. I mean, it's not like I know this for a fact, but I'm saying that
You see it around. You see symbology and things like that. Yeah.
so I'm sure people can get paraphernalia and whatnot of
Hmm.
all these despotic, individuals. But a Che Guevara is as Hitler to Cuban people as
Hmm.
Hitler is to other people.
Hmm.
Um, and yet people have zero,
Well, I would
zero, you know,
I would say that I would wager the vast majority of those people don't know the whole story. They think they do, but don't. So, but
he he he
again,
killed he killed men, women, homo, whatchamacallit,
sexuals, yes,
yeah, um, people that were, African, just all it, freaking, he went, he did them in.
hmm,
Um, so, but it's viewed as a symbol of sort of like rebellion and this and that, and they're wearing it, and they're not willing to look up the info, or if they do run across the information, they think it's a lie made up by the powers
well,
that be in order to trick them into the thing.
hmm, that's what I
Meanwhile,
mean when I say they're getting part of the story, and they're
yeah,
getting the part of the story they want to hear from sources they want to go visit anyway. So,
yeah. Well, and
you know,
how do you explain an obvious, how, like, obvious people like in this island are obviously like petitioning the world outside as vocally with the technology that they have. There's
get
thousands of
us out
hours.
of here. Come help us. Yeah.
There's thousands of hours of there's video footage of people like in squalor,
Hmm.
and all sorts of things, and going out and protesting. How do you how do you adjust for that?
You
And
don't.
people, well, no, and people across the way here completely, like, when confronted with the issue, is like, no, that's not how it really
Yeah,
is.
you
It doesn't
ignore it.
it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Like,
No.
somebody can be blown up in front of you, and
Yeah.
and you come up and say, "Hey, look, is this enough?" No, that doesn't, because, so if humans are capable of doing that, ignoring the obvious, which they are,
Hmm.
putting your hand on a thing to protest something that's not related.
That's and that right there is why I say there needs to be an immediate negative consequence. An immediate, and I stand by my statement. Everybody who paid money to that museum to go in and see that painting in particular needs to be allowed one free punch. Just, you cost me 50 francs to come see this. Bam.
Well,
You are
I
not welcome here. You were not invited here. So whatever happens to you, I can't be held responsible.
no, but I think that there's already lawful procedures that would follow from set actions that might not necessarily involve, like, I know that's the feeling, because
Hmm.
destroying cultural things, it's kind of like, come on, really, you're gonna do that? I mean, you were born probably 20 to 25 years ago at best. You're probably starting college or wherever you are. And you're gonna destroy something that's like 60, 70, 80. No, I'm sorry, even more than that. If it was done in like the 1800s or something, you're gonna destroy something
Because you
that's
didn't
over
get your
200,
way.
because you didn't get your way, because you think it's at the door.
Hmm.
You think that it's at the gates.
You've never wanted, you've never gone without a meal in your life. You've never been told no. You've never been disciplined. You've been spoon fed and hand fed your entire life and gotten your way at every turn. And that's not how real life works. So if you glue yourself to the wall, I hope you brought big trousers, because that's where you're going to do your business. We're not going to accommodate you. You were not invited here. You're not welcome to stay. You are free to go. Get out
Now,
or deal with your own filth, because we're not going to help you.
well, yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a, I think it's obvious that they went way beyond just what is reasonable in every respect. I think that
Hmm.
it's a temper tantrum. They
It
may
is a
believe
tantrum.
what they believe. That, like, they may, because
Yes.
you know what it is, that, like, you end up believing it, and it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, the world is going to, like, freaking come to a close within 10 years,
You know,
due to this thing, and so
but
that's in their brain, you know.
But do you know how many times if I had a nickel for every time I've heard that?
Yeah, but you've
They-
lived enough to
yes,
realize the
I,
bull.
I I get it. But see, and they don't want to hear from somebody who's already been there because we're obviously stupid. We don't know what we're talking about. Never mind the fact that we built everything they own.
Yeah.
We built everything they own. How the hell did we do that without your knowledge, Snowflake?
That understanding is also a huge part to do with wisdom, is all this incoming information from a lifetime of experiences and knowledge and reading books and errors and correcting errors and things sitting on the shelf and pondering. Those are things that you arrive at
Mm-hmm.
because of wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
which we're all granted when
But
we see patterns and we learn lessons, because we have that ability as human beings. But at the age of a young person, everything is imminent.
but yes, and that is true. That is true. And to a person who is 25, 10 years is almost half of their life. So
Yeah,
to try to forecast 10 years down the road sounds like a long time. Well,
yeah,
it isn't.
yeah. They're saying
It
10
just
years and
isn't.
right, but they're saying 10 years, and to them 10 years, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's
Yeah.
but
Well, we've been hearing this argument forever. I mean, according to Sting, the rainforest should have been absolutely gone and it should be the Amazon desert since 2012. Well, it didn't happen, did it, cousin?
that
No,
that
it was
is
a bunch of hyperbole
yeah.
used to try to scare people into donating money to your cause. And
Well,
it just didn't work. That's
I
not how things work. That's not how the real world works.
I looked at that Amazon thing because that was one thing I thought to myself: the Brazilian rainforest and stuff. And obviously, I'm not saying this from
Hmm.
I've studied it profoundly, but I did some time back go and Google and
Hmm.
bird's eye view it, and dude, it's it's never ending jungle with
Hmm.
fauna and flora, and it's like
Hmm.
it's insane. Like it's like, so
Yeah.
where is, I mean, and so if you were to look at what it is that they're foresting, it's a little blip
Yeah.
in the huge thing. So it's like,
Yes,
no.
there is less rainforest now than there was 200 years ago. Yes, that is true. But it's not going at the rate that they're saying it.
Right.
And various people are replanting.
Well,
There are lots of plantations out there. Yes, they are harvesting timber, but as they end the demand for certain types of woods, they're no longer harvesting those trees anymore, you know.
I,
And other people have gotten the sense, wait a minute, I can make this much money off of this tree, plant heck out of it. And they're
well,
doing
yeah.
it.
I want to just, this ties in, and I guess, whatever else we have left before we but this
Yeah,
is something that I don't know if, have you ever heard of the person, the artist called something West, Kan, Kanye
Kanye
West.
West, yeah, I've heard of him, yeah.
He has changed his name to Ye, or Ye.
Okay.
Ye. Wait a second, isn't that,
Okay.
is why would you just shrug that, dude? Do
Dude,
you know that?
because I lived through the artist formerly known as Prince, okay, who was the poster child for "Get Over Yourself." All right, anything anybody does after that is, bush leagues.
The artist formerly known as, so yeah, well, I'm obviously we're having fun with it, but I want to share this with you all, and just your thoughts on it and stuff, or whatever, something to be continued. But the guy is super super wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
exponentially so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where he sits in the thing, but he's like one of the top, like, all time
Mm-hmm.
wealthy and stuff. I saw a few interviews because there was a controversy with him where he mentioned some things about some lawyers that happened to be of a certain religion,
Mm-hmm.
in the music industry, and he called them out as Jewish lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
because these um, and it was it's a big to do, because he's attributing It very may well be that they have this religious,
Connection.
observance, and it very may well be that they're music industry executives slash lawyers or whatnot or entertainment people. But those things don't necessarily, you don't get to, so that thing that you said, um causation doesn't
Yeah, correlation does not equal causation, or does not
you
imply causation. Yeah.
right, so you do have this attribute of a religion, and you do
Hmm.
have this attribute of these people that are working in a field, and
Hmm.
so those two things, you see. But by saying these people, um
You condemn your cause immediately.
because what it is it's like, how about the millions of other people that belong to that religion?
Hmm.
You're attributing to all those it's the same thing with like the whole white and black thing,
Yeah, it's absolutely the
you know
exact same thing. It's bigotry, no matter how you slice it.
right? Because you take one person, oh
Hmm.
look, that, like, let's, to be less benign, oh look, he's wearing an armband with a Casey Kasem 1984 on it. That means that, this guy from this persuasion and Casey Case, it's like you're making assumptions, and grouping everyone and condemning everyone from a thing. So it's not a good way to think, anyways, or to arrive at conclusions about people. Although we do have that tendency because we're human beings and we see
Yeah,
patterns, and we
but
do end up grouping people. But that's not the final say in the matter.
mhm,
The final say isn't, oh, look at all those people, therefore X, Y, and Z. No,
right.
the final matter is, oh, look at all those people, look at that person and
Yeah,
their action and their behavior.
yeah.
Even though there's some, what was it, correlate, or
Correlation.
like attributes that you can associate with other people that person may hold.
Yeah,
If a person's a gunman in some sort of shooting, and they happen to have black hair,
right. I was just getting ready to use that exact example. So, okay, so if they all have black hair, that means all black haired people are that way.
right,
Oh, so he had green eyes. So you got to watch out for green eyed people. Look out. He has a mole on his chin. If you got a mole, you must be the same way.
right, it's a simplistic, it's like, let's solve this
But it's
problem by getting rid of all this.
but
Right,
it's just as valid as any other statement or any other argument. You know, it's just as accurate.
can you expand on that? I
Well,
don't
what I'm
understand.
getting at is saying, "Oh, no, you've got black hair, therefore you must be like this," is
Uh-huh.
just as accurate as saying you are of this religion and you are of
Right,
this profession.
right, at the level
You
at
know,
which it is accurate, which is a broad,
exactly.
it's a broad category that,
And that's what I'm getting at.
yeah,
It isn't accurate at all.
right, right.
It's not accurate at all. So if he's going to stand by that statement, this is my opinion, and I don't know anything about this, but if he's going to stand by that statement, he deserves every instant of backlash he gets on it.
Well, he has had backlash, but here's the thing.
Good.
I watched a few of, so I went and listened. So this is now my bias,
Hmm.
because I, right out the gates, you know
Hmm.
how I feel about like rap music.
Yeah.
I recognize that it takes talent and skill to put words together. Like, I understand. I just simply don't get a thrill from it. I really
Yeah.
don't.
I'm with
I
you.
really.
I'm with you. I don't get a thrill from country western either. I mean,
But if given a choice, I'd be
no, if
listening.
given a choice, I'll still go put on Pink Floyd.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. But I did go and listen because there's this concept that
Hmm.
he, and by the way, it's easy to judge
Hmm.
all sorts of things, but there's this concept that he's a brilliant mind, a
Hmm.
brilliant art, but like on the level of like brilliant. He also has a huge bank account, but I don't correlate
Hmm.
necessarily. Oh, you're wealthy and therefore you're brilliant necessarily.
Yeah, there are a lot of stupid rich people out there.
And there's different factors of how one or why one
Hmm.
is or could be. You could be brilliant in one field and stupid as hell in another.
Exactly.
There's many variations. Well, this guy is not. Um, he doesn't appear formally educated. Neither am I. But So when he speaks, he rambles, and I ramble too. To be honest with you, I think I have a pattern, or I feel very confident that I do. But here's the thing, um, I shelve things, move, then come back, grab it, and I create this situation where there's too much stuff going on. I can self reflect on it. Um, I listen to his music, and I heard some that were popular that I recognize that have been on the air. One or two.
Hmm.
It's all crap in my opinion. From my taste, I can see that people could
Yeah.
like, but in many of them or some of them, he uses samples from stuff
Hmm.
that was popular
Hmm.
before the era of the kids that listen to this music. So if
Yeah.
you're a kid and you listen to Ray Charles in the background, I got a woman, and
Hmm.
you're hearing that little loop in the context of you don't know who Ray Charles is, but now this Kanye guy it
Hmm.
has this song with that vocal, you're thinking, man, this Kanye guy is brilliant because they're hitching a ride.
Hmm.
Yes, he's reconstructing it.
Hmm.
He's doing some sort of collage with it, you know. But these kids,
But he ain't Ray Charles.
right, exactly.
Well,
But
you
so
remember when he
yeah,
did something with Paul McCartney a few years back? There were tweets all over the internet. It became a meme. Man, this Paul McCartney kid's really going to go somewhere if he keeps hanging around with Kanye.
yeah, I
And it's like
remember that.
Kanye wishes he had the brilliance of Paul McCartney. Kanye wishes he was good enough to sweep Paul McCartney's floor, you know?
Well, um,
But if you don't know, you don't know.
if you don't know, you don't know. And obviously, we're not in his shoes. He's got huge fame and fortune
Hmm.
and all these good things. And
Sure.
so, he's blessed in many ways, for better or worse.
Right.
And that's his life. But he's done some interviews trying to explain himself.
That has
And
that ever worked? Has that ever worked?
no, but the mess, the wreckage that he leaves behind
Yeah.
because everything becomes so convoluted, Mark,
Hmm. Yeah.
is and here's my okay, so just to wrap it up, I don't see how people would say he's brilliant.
He may be brilliant at doing what he does on a record album, but that doesn't mean he's brilliant at everything he touches. You know, I don't think anybody could argue that Robert De Niro isn't a fabulous actor, or
Right,
Al Pacino,
right.
or pick your favorite. I mean, Dustin Hoffman. Name your favorite actor.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody would argue that they are not brilliant at what they do.
Mhm.
But would you want them to be your brain surgeon,
No.
or set a broken leg, or fix your car? Maybe one or two of them might be able to. That doesn't mean that they're brilliant at everything they touch. And sometimes the best bet is to just shut up and do what you do.
Mhm.
Just shut up and do what you do. I have spewed more tonight than I have in a long time, and I know I got some unpopular opinions, and I may have alienated a few people, but you know what? I'll own it. I'll accept any backlash that I get from it, but I'm not going to try to run somebody else's life. I'm not going to try to tell people do this and don't do that. I mean, I'm not going to stand there and try to Monday morning quarterback somebody who is out on the football field. One of my absolute favorite commercials that I of all time was Brett Favre, quarterback for at the time the Green Bay Packers. They just put him in a whole bunch of situations where he's walking by this guy trying to pull on the gas pump hose to get it into his car. He walks by and he goes, "I'd have pulled in closer to the pump." And then another one where there's this kid with a chocolate ice cream. He's wearing a white sweater and he's got chocolate all down the front of him. And his dad's got a napkin going, "Ooh, I'd have gone with a vanilla cone in that sweater." And just about 5 or 6 different situations like that. And the announcer comes on and says, "It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback." I thought that was freaking brilliant for all of those NFL fans who said, "Well, why did you throw a pass? I'd have handed it off to him and let him run." He got his opportunity to be I mean, there's a guy with a sack full of, I don't know, potatoes or something like that, and the bottom's falling out of it. And he goes, "Oh, I'd have double bagged that, you know."
I think that that's a good point to um like end it with,
you know,
unless you have more stuff, because I
no,
think
the
that
only, just to wrap it up, I would just say that it's real easy to think that you know how somebody else should do something when you need to be more concerned with what you're doing it and how you're doing it. My grandmother would have summed it up as mind your own business, you know, and if you are not 100% sure about the statement you're going to make, just don't say anything. Answer the question and move on.
or ask or say it in the form of a question, or
Mm-hmm.
preamble it with your level of surety, which is what I try to do that most of the time, which creates it creates a difficult thing because you have to pause more. You have to, but it's more faithful to the what you're offering people, a little bit more faithful than bull crapping people and saying something so sure. But it's hard to do because we're humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve sent us a note, and it's something that's in the description of every video here on the Trampled Underfoot podcast. The opinions of this show are not necessarily those of the sponsors.
Um.
um, just one final thing, and then we can land the plane. Linda said, "I told the mother of a boy I was dating in high school that I was part Indian, grandmother's grandma. I'm blue-eyed blonde. He told me she warned him to be careful because being Indian, I was bound to be wild. And baby, he was right. But, but yeah, got to be careful with that. Presumptions are simply that, you know,
Yeah.
and everybody else quit trying to project your insecurities on other people."
Yeah. Yeah. I like the potato and the different and the commercial thing because of the I like the backseat or Sunday morning
The
quarterbacking or
Monday
Monday
morning
morning.
quarterback,
Yeah,
Monday morning quarterbacks. Yeah.
I like that because it's so well. It's very obvious,
Yeah.
but yet it's very easy to do. It's very easy for us, for me. It's very easy for me to do that.
Mhm.
Catch myself, I'm doing it, but that temptation is so, because at the end of the day we want to make
Yeah.
prognostications.
Now, if you see a kid getting ready to run out in front of a car, yes, you got to, whoa, 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 kid, stop, stop, stop. Look, car, that's not saying don't intervene if you see somebody getting ready to hurt themselves. But,
Yeah.
if I'm not your mother, I'm not going to stand there at the grocery store and go, "Dude, you should double bag that." I'm not your mother, and maybe some people have to learn practical advice
Hey, listen. So
because that's all they know.
so you see these glasses? These are brand new
Mhm.
glasses,
Yes.
right? Um, I for the past, like, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 months, but at first one side of me, the older glasses, cracked, and I said, you know what? I can still hold on to them, and it's not falling off, so it's fine. Then the other one cracked, and so I had two things that were. And then as the weeks progressed, they started to just fall out randomly, and I still refused to get another pair, and I would put them back in, to the point where I added hot glue around the edges and stuffed them in, and that lasted for a while. And I kept going and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it until the other night, for some reason, I guess the plastic got way too flexible. Every time I'd put it back in, I spent like an hour here putting it in, it'd fall click. I'd put it back in, and go click, it'd fall off, and I'd be like, and it got to the point where I said, you know what? That's it. Yes, I know this is a little wild. Be careful, guys, where you spend your cash. A little wild, but I said, you know what? I'm putting my foot down on this one. I got in my car. I drove over to the local Walgreens. open 24/7. And I went down to that little aisle and got myself the thing. I said, you know what? I'm gonna get this for myself. And dude, I should have.
Splurge.
I'm gonna splurge. I
You're
should have
worth
done
it.
this. Here's the thing. I know I knew it then, but I should have done that just the moment it broke. But I'm so freaking. You know what I'm saying? I wanted
What
to push it to the limit.
what you need to do is you need to get into your ancestry DNA, and you need to look and see just how much of that Scottish thing that percentage is, because just in what you just said, I
Yeah.
bet you it just went up 2%. Because you sound like me.
I mean, yeah. Well, so in any event, we'll leave
Let's
it at that. We want to thank you guys. Enjoy your, you know, enjoy yourselves this coming week. It is Halloween. I don't know if many of you, that child in you and stuff. You know what? Enjoy yourselves. I like to throw on a horror movie or two, but I do that all throughout the week. We wish you guys well. We go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern and 6:30 Pacific. And we're live here on YouTube, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. We have a website, which is the Trampled Underfoot Podcast dot com, and you can catch our past episodes there. And we have a site over on the Facebooks where you can drop a message and let us know if you have a show topic you'd like to share with us that we could talk about on the show. And we're also sponsored by
Harneo Media, your web's solution. Look, if you're thinking about developing a web presence, or you're looking to increase your web presence, there is no single thing you can do that is better than getting a website. And I mean a professionally run, professionally maintained website. And the folks at Harneo Media should be your first choice. Steve Nealon and Shay, his partner, they go above and beyond. They will take care of your needs as much or as little as you decide you want for them to do. They're great people. You are not dealing with some faceless, nameless individual in a call center. You are dealing with them one-on-one. That is 100% personalized service. They will do as much or as little as you would like. That's Harneo Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com.
All right. Enjoy your week. I personally suggest Fright Night from the 1980s, but your
With
choice.
with a big bowl of candy corn and circus peanuts.
Yeah. Boy, that sounds sugary.
It does.
Which one do I say? See or peace?
Whichever you want to do, I'll do the other.
But I forget which one I do because I always, for some reason, see ya.
Peace.
We do it the other way though. I
No, we
don't know.
don't.
No, is that the right way?